Good evening and welcome to Chapter 8, Managing Human Resources and Labor Relations. Again, as we continue through this chapter, remember that the last chapter was about organizational structure. I think of Chapter 7 as form and Chapter 8 more as function, right? So now we're getting into the functional aspect of managing an organization through people. And so, a couple of things as we get started on this chapter. I always kind of think about what are some ways of making this directly relevant to those of you who are particularly interested in the profession. So first off, again, the hyperlink takes you directly to the zero cost book, right? So if you click on that hyperlink, it'll open that link right there, which takes you directly to chapter 8 of the zero cost textbook. Secondly, what I have here for you is this Glassdoor link, which takes you right here to the HR director salaries in LA. So this is the average base pay of 117K for, again, HR director in LA, updated November 11, 2019. And some more information here pertaining to the range. The low is 84K, the high is 160K. What jobs are available, etc. Again, this is through Glassdoor, so it lets you know what the going rate is, what the companies in the area that are offering these positions. Definitely, HR pays fairly well, but keep in mind these HR professionals also work really hard. It's a very demanding position. We'll talk a little bit more about the requirements. And another resource that I have here is from the cewgeorgetown.edu. I really particularly love this. They have different publications, and this publication here is the economic value of college major. It's a little bit outdated. It's 2015. Hopefully they update it soon. Once you go to the website, if you click on explore the data, it'll bring you to this area here. And so what's great about this particular map is you could see by major what the rates are for each major by state. We'll talk more about cost of living adjustment in a little bit. This is what's going to affect salaries, etc. And since we're in California, let's click on that. So let's go to California, and then I'm just going to type in human resources, and here we go. So the national wage, what you have here for the median is $58,000 for a bachelor's degree, and the high is at 83K. Again, what I showed you earlier was directly from Glassdoor, but that was for director. So this is a little bit different. Now we're looking at just, in general, the position. If you have a master's degree, an MBA, with an emphasis in human resources, now we're talking about a median of 75K with a high of 107. On the other hand, if we go back and we compare, so the median for the nationwide was 58K. California, we're at 66K. And this is where the master's degree makes a really big difference, because the high is of 131 and the median is 78. So again, that's for that. This is a really great website. I recommend it for those of you who are not quite sure what major you are interested in pursuing. Most of the business majors are going to be there. And again, kind of a neat way of seeing what's available out there for state versus national. Computer science is always a popular one because it pays so well. And masters in computer science is up there too. All right, so that's the little intro there to make it relevant directly to the career path. Moving along to our first slide. So this is what we'll be doing here in terms of this chapter. There's about 9 different areas. Let's just get directly started with the first one, achieving high performance through human resource management. Remember that, HR once upon a time was thought of, people are almost a commodity. You hire them, you train them, they're very disposable. What we've learned since the early 1900s and this is something that you'll learn more about in your management class, there's a lot of people who have come up with a lot of reasons why you get more done when you work through people using a lot of psychology. Human resources is central to any operation, to any company, specifically because it helps direct culture, the corporate culture, for recruitment and development. So the human resource management, our definition here, hiring, developing, motivating, and evaluating employees to achieve organizational goal. That's going to be our basic definition for HRM. Keep in mind, for those of you who are interested in human resources as a major, that most universities, when you transfer to a four-year school, are going to have the HR degree as a sub area of the management degree. So business administration, bachelor's of science or bachelor's of arts, with a concentration in management and a focus on human resource management is usually the flavor you're going to find in terms of availability. HR management has the following sequenced activities. So there's the job design and job analysis. So now, before we go anywhere, we have to decide what is the position. Is this a new position we're creating within the organization, or is this an existing position? And what is the design? HR planning and forecasting. So in terms of the growth of the organization, who we're going to need in the future, maybe seasonal work, or maybe as we grow or as we expand internationally. The recruitment, where we're going to find these people, how we're going to find them. Is it going to be internal first? We're going to look within the company or going outside. How do we select the employees? The training and development, performance and planning and evaluation, and of course compensation and benefit. Some of these I'm going to kind of go over pretty quickly. Others I'll spend a little bit more time on. This is the kind of chapter that could take several hours. So let's go with HR planning and job analysis and design. Again, straight from your book. Job analysis is a study of the task required to do the job well. And so this is where the company has to try to figure out what are the tasks that are required for this job. The tasks and responsibilities of a job are listed within the job description. So the job analysis is going to help you create that job description. What are the tasks? What are the responsibilities? Now, in terms of what kind of individual, what are the skills, the knowledge, the abilities that they'll need to have for the job, we're calling that the job specification. So again, the strategies and the goals and the market position is going to feed into your job analysis and your job design, and which is going to help you with your HR planning and forecasting. That's going to lead to your recruitment, which leads into your selection. Once you've made the selection, you train the individual, you evaluate them, you compensate them, and then you look at the HR outcomes and follow retention and activity. So that's what you're going to find there throughout. This is from your author. I got this from table 8.1. I like it. It's I try to tweak it for the screen. I'm sorry, so wordy. We're not going to look at everything. But it says job description and specification. So what happens internally, this document gets flown around. This is particularly for a college recruiter position. They will report to the VP of HR. The location is a corporate office resource, and it's salaried classification. So the job summary itself is here, right? So notice the difference between the job summary and the job specification, right? So member of HR corporate team, they interact with managers and department heads, determine hiring needs for college grads, visit 20 to 30 college campus each year, follow initial interview, work with corporate staffing specialists, and determine persons who will be interviewed, make recommendations to hiring managers concerning best qualified applicants. So this is a key position to identify, locate, and find and develop talent, right? So now we're looking at the job duties and responsibilities, and we can try as best we can to forecast allocation of time in percentages. Notice what I put in italic over here. This person's key job, a quarter of all of their time, is spent visiting campus to conduct interviews of graduating seniors, right? And then the other things, so develop applicant's file, perform initial applicant evaluation, work with manager department heads, determine college recruiting needs, and then, all the way down to participate tracking graduates who are hired, aid determining campus, etc. Now, once we've got all of that out of the way, let's look at the job qualifications or job specifications. This person is going to have a bachelor's degree in HR management or related field. There's a minimum of 2 years of work experience in HR that's going to be required. People, I got to tell you, this is where it's really critical for you to consider internships before you graduate, before your senior year. If you're able to try to get a foot in the door in the right industry and the right position, it'll pay dividends when you're done. The ability to perform a team environment, especially with line managers, department heads. Sorry, my phone is. And so that's going to play a role as well. Very effective oral written communication skills, reasonably proficient, Excel, Windows, the usual suspects. In this case, PeopleSoft software, which is very popular in that field. Moving along, we're looking now at the human resource planning process, right? So this is Exhibit 8.4. So you have the corporate strategy and policy. Remember, well, we haven't covered it, but when we talk about in management, you'll learn a little bit more about strategy and strategic planning. And this is where you talk about the classics. For example, there's something called the grand strategy, where you have growth, stability, and retrenchment as the kind of the three ways to go. There's actually a fourth, the combination strategy. But basically, is this company growing? To what speed it wants to grow? How it wants to grow? Which direction? Etc. Etc. So your corporate strategy and policy is going to dictate your HR objective and policy. You're looking at two things. You're looking at the HR demand and forecast and the internal supply forecast. You're comparing the two. If there are no differences, your requirements is the same as the supply. If there's an offset, if there's differences, one way or another, then you either have a surplus or you have a shortage. If you have a surplus, you reassign, you lay off, you terminate. Hopefully you don't have to because you manage things well. But if you have a shortage, this is when you hire, you pay overtime, or you subcontract. And so that's kind of like a very basic standard way of looking at HR planning process. So how do firms select qualified applicants? After a firm has attracted enough applicants, employment specialists begin the selection process. So the selection itself is helping you determine which people in the applicant pool possess the qualification necessary to be successful on the job. This is where I tell my students, make sure you guys that you take advantage of the Career Center on campus. You want Chafee, we have an outstanding Career Center. We're always improving it and building it. And you can get a lot of help designing your resume, cover letter. I recommend everyone create a LinkedIn profile now. You want to create one and you want to make sure that you develop it throughout college, jobs, professors, etc. Make sure that you make it so that your senior year, you have a lot that's populated and relevant, that differentiates you and helps you get to the next phase. The degree that you'll have, again, be able to answer the question, why should I hire you? And if there's thousands of people with the same degree and you don't really stand out, it's going to be rough. Do you speak a second language or third language? What do you have a minor? Again, the experience, all of these things. The Career Center also has mock interviews, which I strongly recommend that you look into. They're amazing. I don't care how confident you are. When people get nervous, they're a mess. And sometimes you don't really get to see how you really are at a job interview until you go through a mock interview, which often will be recorded, and you get to see yourself being recorded after the fact, and often you'll be your own best critic. So the steps in the employee selection process are shown in the next slide. We'll look at that. An applicant who can jump over each step or hurdle will likely receive a job offer. So this is basically what that looks like, right? You have your screening, application, interview. Next step, the employment testing. testing, the selection interview, the background and reference check. I'll have a little bit to say about that. The physical exam, depending on the company, and of course the decision to hire. So that's what we're talking about here. An applicant can be rejected at any step of that hurdle, and the selection step or hurdle are described as the initial screening and the employment testing, right? So the initial screening, applicant completes application form, submits resume as a brief interview, 30 minutes or less. And then finally, the employment testing. We're going into initial screening, maybe asked to take one or more tests, such as the Wonderlic personnel test. I recommend that you Google that, you familiarize yourself with that, so that you're not surprised one day when you have to fill one out at a job site. All right, so employee selection. I was telling you a little bit about something that I have for you here. I'd like you to kind of, when you think about your background and reference checks, here's the deal. When you go through this maybe first, second, third level interview and you're dismissed, that employer is not going to tell you why. In the old days, you could ask, do you have any feedback? But now because of litigation, no employer is ever going to let you know why they're not moving forward, right? And so you have to make sure that this is why it takes a lot of skill, time, effort, endurance for you to develop all of these interview skills, the interview questions. Make sure that, when you think about your college classes, business majors, it's going to serve you very well to not just think of your classes as these things that get in the way of your degree. I've had too many students over the years who started class maybe with the wrong attitude. I just got to get through this. I'm just here for the degree. Remember why you're here. You're here for the knowledge. The degree will come with that, but you're here for the knowledge. I don't care if you're, marketing major. When you take that accounting class, remember the quick ratio, the acid test. Remember some of those things because they will come in really handy one day at a time where you don't expect them to come in handy. So you're there for the knowledge, right? Remember that. And I say this to you because you have no idea what's going to transpire at that job interview, and you want to make sure that you're well-rounded. So having said that, the background and reference check, I remind my students that the famous quote goes like this: what happens on the internet stays on the internet forever. There's Eric Qualman who wrote a book called Socialnomics. I was lucky enough to see him once give a talk where he said, what happens in Vegas stays on the internet forever. And so that's all fine and dandy, but you're going to a job interview and you don't know once they get to the research piece what's out there, or you haven't really cared, and maybe you have some stuff that's hurting you. I'm going to use the example of our Chaffey College website, right? So if I just do our regular chaffey.edu, this is where we are now, right? This is what our website looks like today. But just for fun, let's see how far back we can go with this website. So in 2002, there's a record of January 30th of our Chaffey College website at this time right here with one snapshot. So let's see what we have. This is what our website looked like once upon a time. And what's really cool about this is, you could see what the website looked like, but the interesting thing is you can actually click on some of these links and it'll take you to the area in these particular days so you could see what the website looks like. So you might be wondering, like, why do I care about this? Well, because again, this is called the Wayback Machine, what I just showed you. And there are these types of companies out there that crawl the web and do screenshots and track and keep everything. And so what you think might have been deleted might not have been deleted. So again, this is why you want to make sure that you're very careful about your digital footprint, and that you know that one day an employer or even a university is going to be looking at that stuff. All right, moving along. Let's move on to your employee training and development. To ensure that both new and experienced employees have the knowledge and skills organizations invest in training and development activities. It's very interesting. There's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that really are trying to recruit the help of four-year schools and graduate schools to help them train. The community college system right now is working in partnership with the state and a lot of companies in terms of training. And so why? Because there's a huge need from a lot of companies in manufacturing, etc., for community colleges to pick up some of the training and help these organizations with their own training. If you think about core competency, right? If I'm a company that makes computers, my core competency is making computers. My core competency is not training and developing people in whatever IT. And so it makes a lot of sense thereby that that a lot of times gets outsourced, right? So the training and development, learning situation in which the employee acquires additional knowledge to increase the job performance. There's different ways of looking at that. There's the on-the-job training. Orientation entails new employees to show them around. And through the training, there's different techniques. Job rotation. What a lot of smart companies do is when you start a new position, instead of just going straight to that department, for about a month or two, you'll be going to other departments within the company. And a lot of people don't really truly understand the benefit of that. The true benefit is as you work and function and navigate through the company, you can really be way more effective and efficient when you have a clear understanding of how the companies work and what the requirements of your peers are, so you can better navigate the company in terms of moving forward. Apprenticeship, specific on the job instruction with classroom training, and of course mentoring, very popular with lots of organizations. Your performance planning and evaluation. So here's the deal. Once upon a time, companies used to do performance evaluation once a year. That's really changed drastically with a lot of organizations. Now you're evaluated permanently. There's all kinds of interesting tools that are used out there to help companies do that. HRIS information, a human resource information system, for example, track everything, what classes you're taking, what projects you've worked on, what departments you've worked with, anything like that, so that someone within the organization can have access to your file and be able to recruit you internally with great ease. So the appraisal happens really now pretty much on an ongoing basis with lots of organization. So you have your performance planning, where you set the standards and expectation. You look at the employee job, task, behavior, how the employees, in terms of behaving and performing. You're evaluating, and then you reward if they're doing a great job, or you create some changes and give feedback so that they can improve. This is an example. So remember that employee earlier, we were looking at recruiting, right? The college recruiter. So your author on table 8.3 has this table that shows a performance appraisal for that same employee. So in terms of the rating, you're looking at all these explanations of ratings, and some of them are great. For performance rating at the top, recruiter plans and organize spring semester college recruiting and maximize number of college visited. That's 9. Let's assume it's out of 10. It's fantastic. But on the other end over here, at number 1, the ranking 1 over here, the lowest, the recruiter is always late completing campus recruiting report. So this is just a way of creating a rating rubric to help the employee with their performance appraisal and improvement plan. Employee compensation and benefits. I'm going to keep this one pretty straightforward. You have the pay structure, internal influence, so you're looking at wages, salaries, etc., based on skills, experience. This is where equity really, really counts. General Electric used to refer to itself as a meritocracy, things based on merit in terms of advancement, pay, etc. The pay level and the external influence. So you want to see what the competitors are paying people and how much to pay. If competitors are paying higher wages, a firm may lose its best employees. HR professionals regularly evaluate salaries by geography, job position and competitor. That's why I started this whole lecture with Glassdoor, with the HR director position in LA. If you were to research that same position, maybe somewhere in the central states of the United States, you would find, because of the cost of living differential, a much lower wage. So let's talk about that. The Nerd Wallet is it has this cost of living calculator based on location, right? And so let's pretend that you live in okay, let's go with San Francisco, and your boss is currently talking to you about having you move out of state. They're transferring you somewhere else. You're in San Francisco, and let's say you make an even $100,000 a year, and they're going to, I don't know, here, Alaska. Perfect. Let's just pick the first one. So they're going to move you to Alaska, and they're telling you that instead of $100,000 a year, they're going to pay you $80,000 a year. So you might think like, what? That's $20,000 less. That's a pay cut, right? Well, that $100,000 a year in San Francisco is equal to $61,000 in Anchorage, Alaska, because the cost of living is 38% less. So if your boss moves you to Anchorage, Alaska and pays you $80,000, technically that's a pay raise. Yes, it's less than 100, but because of cost of living where you're moving, you're going to get paid more than the equivalent 61K. So I hope that makes sense. It's something to consider if you want to compare differences in salary, right? Don't just pick a high number of someone who lives in a different area. Make sure that you account for cost of living, or your argument's not going to last very long. Another way of looking at cost of living is through, in this case, the year, the time, right? And so what we have here is just another calculator. They're all over the place, right? So if someone was hired for a job, I don't know, so let's just say 2009, 9 years, 10 years ago, sorry. And let's say that when they first started, they started at $60,000, and today they make $70,000 10 years later. Let's find out, oops, that's, 60. So if they make $70,000, all right, they never really truly got a pay raise. What they did is actually they got a pay decrease, because $60,000 in 2009 is $71,000 in 2019 money, right? And so that's the cost of living adjustment looking at years. And so it's really critical to understand, if you're again trying to understand negotiating pay, etc., that a pay increase it has to be more than just keeping up with the cost of living adjustment. So if somebody worked for this company over here and was getting paid $60,000, and 10 years later they got paid $71,000, that is not a pay increase. That is exactly the same amount as the $60,000 when they first started. Something to really consider when negotiating salary. A lot of people will defer to the Social Security Agency for cost of living adjustment, but it's fairly conservative. So this is the Social Security cost of living adjustment. COLA stands for cost of living adjustment, and it shows you year to year. So for example, the expected, the 2018 cost of living adjustment is 2.8%. So if your salary was $100,000 in 2017, well, you should really make sure that you get $2,800, so $2,800 more in the next year would be exactly the same salary, keeping up with COLA. In some years, Social Security said it was the same. In 2019, we're expected to go up by 1.6. You can see how all this stuff is going to add up when you start to look at all these percentages multiplied by, for example, 10 years. I hope this is helpful for you. With this lecture, I'm trying to make sure I cover the material, but also apply it to you above and beyond the textbook. Labor relations process. I'm keeping this one pretty straightforward. It's in the book. There's a lot more to it if you're interested. Tens of thousands of American firms are unionized. Millions of U.S. workers belong to unions. This is just an old photo of early on fighting for unionization. Traditionally, what's happened is that it always has been manufacturing, mining, etc., that has been unionized. But what you're finding out more is there's more service-based firms now that are forming unions, including healthcare as well. A labor union is an organization that represents workers in dealing with management over disputes involving wages, hours, and working conditions. It's a really very sensitive topic, and it affects people in different ways. And companies react sometimes unpredictably to unionization, right? I remember this one case study. It's not a case study. I'm sorry. Walmart, one of the first Walmarts to become unionized was a Walmart in Canada, and the company fought pretty hard to make sure that particular store would not become unionized. And if memory serves me well, shortly after the store was effectively unionized, Walmart closed the entire store, predictably, or maybe the assumption is that to make sure that that didn't spread to other stores. So there's, again, very sensitive topic. There's a lot of material out there if you want to know more about it. There, as you can see, in terms of the legal environment of HR, labor relation, we've had lots of acts. This is 2 columns, right? I couldn't put the whole thing in one screen. These are all from your textbook. And so over here on the left, you have Social Security Act starting in 35, and so provides retirement income for old age and care. Yes, Social Security didn't come out of the blue. It was an act passed in 35. Wagner Act, workers the right to unionize. Again, Taft-Hartley, obliterate the union bargain, and good faith prohibits union unfair labor practices. Equal pay, Civil Rights Act, age discrimination, lots and lots. Look at some of these years. Pregnancy discrimination, only in 78 did we finally pass this thing. Americans with disability, only 1990. Prohibits employment discrimination based on mental or physical disability. But look at the FMLA. This is the latest one, right? So if you think about that particular act, it's one of the more modern ones. Family Medical Leave Act. This one is interesting to me. Require employers to provide unpaid leave for childbirth, adoption, or illness. What hopefully stands out is unpaid. Basically, you gave birth, we'll let you spend some time with your baby, we'll keep your job for you, but don't expect to get paid for it. I believe the author states that about 11% of companies will go above and beyond the law and pay their employees. Most don't. And so I'm ending this lecture with a little trivia for you. This is from your author again. This is the source for the trivia I'm about to ask you, which goes like this. Oh, hopefully, no. How many countries in the world do not guarantee paid parental leave? So we just said the US is one of them, right? Well, Liberia, Suriname, Papua New Guinea, and the United States. 4 countries on the planet. And again, this is the source below here. Do not guarantee paid parental leave. Notice the United States is the only developed country in the world that still does not pay new parents for spending time with their newborn children, or children who have require hospitalization or extreme medical care. You don't get paid, you just get to keep your job. Some food for thought there. That's the last slide. So again, same as always, please make sure that you refer to your textbook. Remember that the slides are a way for me to summarize content from the chapter. I encourage you, of course, to read the chapter when you're ready. The test is available on the website. Please only take the test once you've gone through the presentation and read the slides and memorized the definitions and understood the concepts. The assignment will be posted as well. I will see you guys soon with the next chapter.